Boston Week. Our mission with this conference is simple: to bring together the entire startup community across every industry, department, and funding stage. Startup Boston exists to connect, educate, and celebrate this ecosystem while serving as a trusted, unbiased guide to the best resources that can help you start and scale your startup or your team. My name is Elena Lobianco. I'm a consultant with TriNet. We are a HR partner for startups and small businesses to help you scale confidently as you're growing your business. And I will be your hostess today. Before we kick things off, I do want to give a huge thank you to Suffolk University for hosting us. Suffolk has generously, get my words together this afternoon, needs my coffee over there. They've generously partnered with us for the past 3 years, providing this space in kind because of their deep commitment to supporting Boston's startup community. If you're interested in exploring entrepreneurship, they offer a variety of programs and opportunities. So be sure to stop by their table right outside in the vendor hall to learn how they can support your journey and how you might get more involved in supporting their entrepreneurial students as well. We have a wonderful panel discussion that we'll be diving into: the crystal ball, mastering health scores to predict and prevent churn. So if that is not what you were expecting to learn here today, then you might want to visit another wonderful session, but guaranteed to be a great one. I will kick it over to our moderator, Parker, to get going and enjoy the session.
Thank you, Elena. Hi, everybody. And that's really loud, but I'll back up a little bit.
You can move these.
I can move them? Yes. All right, excellent. Yep. If I get too loud, just let me know. So thank you all for joining our session. We've got a great panel, a lot of experts in the room here in terms of customer health scores. So we'll answer a lot of questions around when to start them, how to go about doing them, are you doing them right? I was joking with someone downstairs. Some people call them health scores because they are not particularly perceived very well. So love to get a sense from the audience in terms of, are they working for you? Are they not working for you? And then we'll dig in. So we'll kind of build this out from scratch. I'm Parker Chase Corwin. I'm a founder and CEO of my consultancy, which is called Experience Alchemy. I run customer programs and build customer programs for early stage startups as well as growth stage companies. I've been doing customer success and post-sales for about 20 years or so. So have built out several programs at different size companies. Health scores is always an ingredient in the mix. So really excited to dig in on this topic. And then let me actually turn it over to Sandra. And if you want to, everyone will go through and give themselves a good 60-second intro or so.
Awesome. Thanks, Parker. Hi, everyone. My name is Sandra Quintero. I am, as I described myself, once an aspiring dentist turned customer success manager. I flipped drills for customer success just out of love of building relationships, and have been doing that for the past few years. In my most recent role, I lead strategic initiatives with our enterprise clients and really focus on driving the metrics, success planning, and excited to be diving into this topic with you all today. I'll hand it over to Alistair.
Thank you. I'm Alistair Meffin. I am a customer success executive. I've been in the industry now about the same as Parker, about 20 years or so, all in healthcare technology. So I've done end-to-end life cycle at this point, working with all the way from the beginning of pharma all the way through to the HCPs, and doing identity and access management with them. My main focus as an executive has always been vision and strategy. I do put a lot of weight, and I'm going to not call them health scores. I'm actually going to steal Churn Zero and say they're churn scores. Because, churn scores, you really do want to know when your accounts are going to churn. A health score, we'll talk about it, but doesn't indicate necessarily what you think it does.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I am Colette King, and I'm actually a product manager at HubSpot, and I lead our customer success tools. So that is our customer success workspace, our customer health scores, relevant for this conversation, and then our feedback survey products. So all those teams sit under my purview. But before going to HubSpot, I've been here for 6 years now. I was actually a customer success manager at a startup here in Boston. We were a very small sales enablement company, and we shut down about 6 years ago. No laughing. Thank you.
What I like about this panel is we've got representatives from each kind of area of the business. So Alistair will kind of help to represent the leadership. Colette from the product side. I mean, you think about customer success, delivering customer success. That is not just a customer success manager motion. That's a whole company motion. So I love that we have product represented. And then Sandra will help us from more of like the individual contributor, boots on the ground, someone who's managing customer relationships directly. So Alistair touched on this, and I think it's a good place to start, which is actually defining what a customer health score is. I'll take a shot at it, and if anyone wants to add to this, I welcome it from the audience as well. But really, I think the benefit of a customer health score is that you're trying to find a single quantifiable metric to really associate with the relationship that you have with a customer. So are we looking at a customer in terms of are they, and there are different ways to look at this, are they healthy? What does healthy mean? Are they at risk to churn? Are they potentially an expansion prospect? Is there something about that relationship that we can extract and then turn that into a measurement? So a health score can be incredibly useful, particularly as you have large populations of customers. So for you all, and I'm going to poll you in just a second, for folks who have large number of customers, that can be a really interesting tool to be able to get to a point where you can prioritize your team's actions and focus. And for companies with smaller customer bases, it really gives you a sense of what's important. So you as a company can define and decide what are the measurements that we want to look at in terms of what is that health. So I'll stop there, see if anybody else wants to add to that, contribute. I guess I could.
Pretty good.
Hit it. Yep.
Okay, fair enough. I do want to poll the crowd. So for folks in the room, I'd just show of hands. I'd love to understand, first of all, how many folks here actually have customers today? Because one of the questions we'll talk about is, all right, fantastic. All right. So lots of post-commercial companies here. How many folks are using a health score today? Okay, just a few, which is great. You're in the right spot.
That's great.
Anybody tried to implement health scores and just abandoned ship? Okay, yeah, maybe a few more.
No.
All right, good. So we're going to take that and work that into the questions here. I think given that the assumption here was that most of you are kind of in that stage where you haven't really explored this yet, we're going to start from the beginning. So I'd love to help to ask questions that I think will help you figure out where to start, what makes a good health score. And so maybe Alistair, I'm going to kick it over to you. So given where the audience is right now, if they have, say, a smaller population of customers, probably some limited product telemetry. So if you think about health score components, product telemetry usage being one of those key factors. If they wanted to start building out their first health score with limited customers and limited signals, where do you start?
Well, it depends, Parker.
Oh, all right, wait. He's goading me.
Sorry, yeah.
I made the panelists sign a contract, actually. We can't answer with "it depends." So I'm going to hold you to it.
Yeah.
All right.
So the first place you have to start is your product. There's no question about it. As you're building your product, you need to be thinking about how am I going to build in metrics that are easily pulled out and measured. If you don't have that from the start, it gets really, really hard to build a health score. I am a big fan of quantifiable, not a huge fan of quality. So that's how I think about health scores, is starting with the product. The next thing you need to think about is, where are you trying to take your product? Do you already have a product fit? Do you know that you have a product fit? And being able to get that information out from your customers, because that information then determines for you whether they're healthy or not, right? Because your definition of healthy is different than their definition of healthy, no matter how good your health score is. I don't care how good it is, guaranteed it's not what your customer thinks about. So you need to be focused on what is the most valuable pieces of your product to your customer and measuring that and bringing it into the health score. So user activity in those areas is really important, and understanding that. The other piece is where they are in their customer journey with you. So are they early? Had they just become a brand new customer? Two companies ago, we called those customers blue. So their first 90 days, they were in blue, and we didn't give them a health score. We actually went through the onboarding process with those customers and then gave them a health score. And the CSMs were actually metriced on where those customers came out. Were they red, yellow, or green? So I think that's where you got to start initially is those product metrics and where the customer is in the life cycle. The later you get in the life cycle, the more and more important the product usage becomes, and whether or not they're expanding or renewing with you.
Awesome. Yeah, I heard a couple of really good points there. So product telemetry, super important, and we're going to expand on that in just a moment. I loved your point on first 90 days because you're not getting enough signals really to understand the health of the customer in the first 90 days. There are certainly things that your onboarding team, your implementation team can direct you on, and you can mobilize the troops to maybe recover if you have a scenario that requires that. But when you're thinking about overall customer health, it's early. They may not know exactly how to interact with you yet. They may not be in sort of the steady state systems where they're interacting with your support team yet. So there's an interesting line there that as a company, I think you need to think about, like, when do they graduate to that point where they can really start to be governed by a health score, I would say. I like that a lot. Colette, I want to branch over to you because I think when we talk about product telemetry, I've seen companies that have like way too much data and they want to pull it all into a health score. And then I've seen companies who maybe, again, don't have quite enough data. So I'd love to sort of think about, how do you figure out like what's the right data to pull into a health score?
Yeah, the thing that I tell customers to start with is you have to talk to the people who have been working with your customers. If you don't have someone that you could point to, even if they don't have the official title of customer success manager, if there's not someone who you can point to and say, this person knows our customers inside and out, you respectfully have no business building a health score. Like, you need to get a person boots on the ground, talking to your customers day in and out, understanding there should be someone who is a true expert in what a healthy customer looks like, because otherwise you can't create that definition of what outcomes you're trying to drive. You just don't have the context, and you're going to spend a lot of time massaging systems and data to try to give you an answer that it won't be able to provide. So I always recommend you talk to those customers, you talk to that person first, and you say, you pick a smattering of customers and you walk through, okay, what's your evaluation of this customer, walk through the line. How healthy do you think each of these customers are? And explain to me why you feel they are healthy or unhealthy. And you can start to see some patterns emerge. In general, I say pick 3 to 5 things to start with. There are 3 to 5 most important things that you can actually track. Now, if you think that there is a product activation that is really important and indicates this customer has captured value from your product, they're going to love it, but you can't put that into your system that's tracking health score, it doesn't really matter. Or if that data coming in is going to be inconsistent or inaccurate and your team is not going to be able to trust it, it doesn't count. So your top 3 to 5 factors that you can actually track that impact the customer's health as based off of your team. And then you set up your score and you leave it for 3 to 6 months minimum. If you have a very short contract cycle, if you have customers who are could cancel anytime, if they are only committing for a month at a time, that's a different story. But if you have an annual contract, you set up a health score and you let it run for 3 to 6 months. When I say you let it sit, you're not changing the inputs of the health score, but you are actively monitoring how that health score is doing. So it's not like sit back, relax, enjoy your work. It's tracking, okay, every week, every month, sitting down with your team and saying, okay, our system is telling us these customers are healthy, these customers are at risk. Do we agree? Do we believe? If not, go back to that drawing board and list out all of the reasons why they are being listed, like if they're saying it's healthy and you don't think they are, why don't you think those customers are healthy? So during that 3 to 6 month period, you are very actively tracking, but you are not adjusting your health score until you have sufficient information to understand what needs to be changed, whether it is you're not tracking the right data, you need to change your inputs, or you need to change the impact that those inputs have on the overall score.
I want to, I love that point on the discipline required to let it sit there. I want to pose a question back to the three of you. Have you ever had a situation where your first hypothesis around the health score was wrong and you had to go back to the drawing board? Just curious.
100%.
Please, would
Yeah.
you expand?
So I'll use definitive again. The initial health score that we put in place was really a gut feeling. I've done health scores plenty, and we put it in place, and we were seeing about 65 to 70% accuracy, which is not good. You cannot be that low. And so we actually ended up having to bring in, we had an analyst who was phenomenal. I will hire him tomorrow if I can, who basically took all of the inputs, as Colette said. We had about 15 that we brought in, and he spent 3 months analyzing. He did 2 years. Now we were much further along, so we had 2 years worth of data that we could analyze. And how do we then end up at 5? That was our goal. We only wanted 5 metrics. And so he did all of that analysis to then see how they correlated and what were the top 5 correlated metrics. I will point out that none of them were sentiment. We had no qualitative metrics in that health score. That health score ended up being 95% accurate. And I could actually predict churn based on the health score going up or down. So 1% of health score up or down was worth 1% of our revenue. So I knew that. So I could easily associate my team's work to the revenue that's coming in to the company.
Nice. Anyone else want to add?
It's a pretty good example.
Yeah, I will offer, I think, the accuracy of your health scores, and we're going to get into quantitative versus qualitative in just a moment, but the accuracy of the health scores, it's so important to building trust within the organization. So if you have a health score that people just doubt, you have a customer success manager, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. You have a CSM who perhaps is managing the account, knows the relationships very well. They take a look at the health score and it's like, that's just not right. You're immediately going to see the organization start to drift away from it. So do you have any thoughts in terms of how, as a CSM, as a relationship manager, your role really, I think, in the customer health score trust or belief?
Yeah, it's interesting because I do think that there is something to be said about qualitative that isn't necessarily captured in just the numbers.
The data points, right?
Yeah, one prime example in my previous organization, we were heavily focused on usage and how were they going into the platform, utilizing it. But I knew, so this particular client was looking green. And I said to my leadership, absolutely not. They're not really engaging. They're not really showing up to calls. We don't even have an executive sponsor. There's no champion. All of those things to me signal red. And I said that to the leadership. Yes, they were utilizing, but we weren't expanding on the account. And so the minute that we started incorporating a lot of those more strategic conversations, are we actually measuring to their business outcomes and having those really important conversations, we really started to see a shift in the account. And yes, it went from what I perceived it to be, what seemed to be green to actual green. And the client actually did end up expanding by like 20%. And so I think for me, there are things for sure that a health score simply does not capture. And I think to Colette's point, being able to have those syncs on a pretty regular basis with leadership on how are we actually tracking beyond what the numbers are just telling us is really important. So, yeah.
if you're not talking with your team about your health score and the inputs that are going into it, that's another, not to be dramatic, but that's like, why have the health score in the first place? If that's not a thing that you are actively reviewing with your CSMs in one-on-ones and coaching calls, it becomes an operational tool. You'll lose the buy-in, and it starts to diverge. And in whether it's a couple months or a couple years, you're going to have a big problem on your hands.
100%. Yeah.
Liz, oh, please.
Sorry, I think just to add, ensuring data hygiene as well. And
Yeah.
what's going into these is really important because oftentimes as a CSM, I am going into Gainsight, for instance. I don't know how much you might be using that, but that is a metric, but it might not actually be properly tied to the product, or there might be multiple products that a client with multiple teams have bought into that I am having to kind of go back and forth on making sure that it is properly mapped. Because if we're, again, focusing just on health scores, but even just the baseline of those health scores is not accurate, then we don't really have much to go on. And so I think that data hygiene and proper mapping is really an important part of it.
You touched on a couple of really important qualitative measures in terms of like, is the customer meeting their business outcomes? Do we have an executive sponsor? Like some of those you could do in a numerical sort of way, but I want to get into this debate between qualitative and quantitative, right? So you've got signals that are coming from your product, from your engagement with the customers. How many support tickets are they opening? Or when was the last time you had an executive conversation with them? Things like that. You can really track and put either a date or a number against. But there's contextual awareness, which I think as a CSM or as a relationship manager, you can bring to the table and sort of put your stamp on it to say, yes, I know all the signals are saying that this customer is red. However, I've had a conversation with the business decision maker, and I know for a fact they're acquiring another company right now, and they're going to expand with us. Like maybe there is something you can't quite see in the data signals that are coming through.
Yeah.
So since you had such a violent reaction towards qualitative, let's start with you. Tell me a little bit more about where you see qualitative maybe contaminating the health score, perhaps?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're all humans, right? At the end of the day, and we are prone to making mistakes. So, which is why I steer all of my health scores towards metrics and data-driven information. However, I think you can turn those engagements and those, whether you have a decision maker, do you have the buy-in from the business owner, how high are you in the organization? All of that is actually quantifiable. You can certainly do that. It's really important that you have data hygiene from that perspective. So if a decision maker leaves, it's on the CSM to make sure that they go in and uncheck, right? And so that will then drive another activity that they need to go do with if they own the renewal, then it's on them. But if they have an account executive, to work with that account executive to go find the new business owner. As you become more mature in a company, you can start to measure business outcomes that they're quantifiable. Now, I said that I don't have anything in the health score that's qualitative. However, I allow my CSMs to override that score. Now, they can only override it to green or red, no yellows.
I like that.
So, because if you do that, everybody's going to end up being yellow. That's ridiculous. You don't have that many yellows. And so, when we start the year, so going back to Colette's on monitoring, I only change my health score, churn score once a year. So we start in October, we start analyzing all of the data, and then we will work with the team. We will run the new score by them. We'll put sets of customers in front of them and say, hey, does this feel right? Does it not feel right? And then we'll implement that starting January 1st. As soon as you do that, all the data that's behind it is bad. I don't care how little you moved it. It's bad. So you have to be very conscious of that, and that's why changing it only 3 to maybe even once a year, twice a year at most. So, but that's how I view qualitative. It's important. Don't get me wrong. The context is important, but it's only the context on top of the score that is important.
Like it. Sandra, Clay, you want to add?
I think I take a little bit of a different approach, just because I don't run HubSpot's health score. That's not my job. We have a wonderful CX operations team, and they work with our CSMs to figure out what that should look like. And it is primarily at this point driven by product usage data. But I also am very aware that for our largest accounts, our most strategic accounts, those customers are in those renewal or forecasting conversations. The CSM for those accounts is weighing in very heavily with a lot of qualitative data. We're looking very heavily at the sentiment of their comments just in general in all of our conversations with our customers. So I think like a general rule of thumb is when it's easier to leave, when you have a slightly more, if you're closer to the more transactional end, even if you still have a CS team, go more with data. When you cross a certain threshold of spend, number of people in your customer's org who are involved in the decision to keep or churn from your software, that's where that business context becomes, I think, a little bit more relevant. Things like mergers and acquisitions can happen all the time, and that could tip in your favor or it could tip against your favor. Sure. They could say, we're going to merge, but we actually love, for my example, it would be Salesforce. So we're Gainsight. We're going to go to one of those platforms. So I think that when it's a really big, expensive deal, when it's a really complex org, if you have multiple divisions, let's say you're selling to a university and you're selling to the biology department and the entrepreneurship department, that qualitative piece starts to become a little bit more relevant. So for me, it's not and it depends, but there are situations where qualitative makes more sense than others.
And I would say enterprises starts to become the exception.
Yes.
Because you're also going to have folks like Sandra on those accounts, and you've hired them for a reason.
That's right.
Right. So use them in those big accounts. I worked primarily with IDNs. We had Kaiser as a customer.
Yeah.
I was their CSM. So the health score meant nothing as far as that, because I was talking to them every week.
Yeah.
So there is a divide line for sure. I agree.
Anyone in the crowd dealing explicitly with enterprise customers? A little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. So the only thing I'd like to add on to that is simply with large accounts like that, they're multi-dynamic. You've got so many different variables that are coming into play with decision makers. Maybe you're a multi-product company and one of your products is doing exceptionally well, one of your products is not. There are all these different variables. So one thing I think is super important to set the expectation within your organization is around sort of how do we think about the health score? This is a directionally accurate signal. So you can't make it, the be all end all of the customer relationship. There has to be some element of debate. There has to be some element of really taking your focus and directing it towards a certain area. So maybe a question over to you is, as we think about like kind of the components of a health score, how do we get it into the system? So how do we roll it out to the team? How do we make sure that the team is using it in the right way? That when a member from the product team, perhaps, or the executive team takes a look at the health score, they're thinking about it in the right context.
Yeah. I mean, definitely ensuring, number one, that it is accurate. That is, I would say, number one, and making sure that whatever platform you're utilizing to be able to track the health score is reliable as well. And I have experience with Gainsight, and so that's a big part of it. But I think it kind of going back to what I was saying earlier on making sure that it is I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. Able to track those things that perhaps and sorry,
That's okay. No, in terms of rolling out. So what I was thinking of is how do we operationalize it? So when we think about getting it out to the troops, using that in, say, our board slides, or using that in terms of our monthly cadence or whatnot, I'm curious, like, how do you see it emerging within the companies that you've worked with?
Yeah. I mean, definitely ensuring that we are incorporating it in the decks that we're covering with our clients as well, right? Like, are we incorporating any of the data as well into EBRs, executive business reviews, or quarterly business reviews that we might be hosting with our clients? Are we making sure that we are incorporating as part of our conversations with the clients these metrics that are important to them, and really having that understanding, especially up front, on what is that it's important to the client, and as well, tying it back to the health score. So, yeah, definitely, those are some of the ways in which I have found has been really helpful in continuing to track those on a week or monthly, biweekly, whatever the cadence is with your given client. So that has definitely been one of the ways in which I've seen it that's been successful.
Great.
Those EBRs that you were just talking about, that's another great way to figure out what to put in your health score. Like, the things that you are talking to your customers about, and the things that, if you start to see a pattern, like everybody kind of wants to talk about the same things, that's a great indicator of what you should be tracking to put in your health scores, because that's what your customers care about. Like, that's where your value spots are.
So we've talked about tools. You mentioned Gainsight, for example. Obviously, we've got HubSpot at the table. Let's pretend we've come up with our hypotheses. We've got our 3 to 5 signals that we want to put into our health score. How do we manage it? Like, what tools do we need to get started? Maybe we don't have the budget for a Gainsight, for example. So, like, and Colette, I'm going to give you a nice softball here. But
I was saying, that was such a layup.
But
I will
when we
take
think
it.
about getting started, like, could I simply start with a spreadsheet?
So you can absolutely start with a spreadsheet. And we see customers coming onto HubSpot from spreadsheets all the time, and those spreadsheets got them very far. I used a spreadsheet when I was working at a startup. You don't need to start with a formal system, but it does make your life a lot easier after a certain point. The plug I will give for HubSpot, and I will try to limit myself to 1, maybe 2.
She's fresh off of inbound.
Yes, I have been in sell mode for customer success for like a week. We had a great time out in San Francisco at inbound. But one of the reasons that we built customer success into HubSpot is that is where all of your customer data should already be living. We are a CRM system. We have sales tools. We have marketing automation tools. So you have your entire all of the data from all of your go-to-market teams living in one place. That is the prime example to pull from to create your health score. That is also, with the advent of AI, that data consolidation is going to make it a lot easier to generate insights around customer health and figure out what next best actions need to be taken in response to those health triggers. So I think, in general, what I would recommend customers do is you graduate from a spreadsheet into a CRM. A lot of CRMs, whether it's HubSpot, whether it's another system, are going to have some basic calculated field property, even if you're not paying for access to a dedicated health score. That can be a great next step. And then whenever you're ready, starting with something like HubSpot, our Service Hub Pro seats start at $90 a month. You only need one. And that unlocks the full health score for you. So you get the full health score reporting, you get your historical trends and analysis, you get the full report, you get access to the customer success workspace. And we're not the only system out there that has that. But yes, you can absolutely start with a spreadsheet. I think honestly, the biggest issue, the tripping point that I see people needing another system for is when they get access to the product usage data. Putting that in a spreadsheet is very difficult. I wouldn't recommend doing it. But if all you're doing, if you're tracking number of engagements, if you're tracking general sentiment of engagements, number or severity of support tickets, all of that can be done and updated in a spreadsheet. You just need to have your team update it. And that's debatably reliable. But then that stuff is manageable. It's the product usage data that I think really pushes people into a CRM, or when your team and your customer base grows to the point where no one is reliably or accurately updating that spreadsheet, and it's just kind of slowly falling out of date. That's when you want to transfer to something that looks a little bit more like HubSpot.
Yeah. So I would actually add one in between. So AI. So I've started building in concert. You can actually start to bring in those inputs into Concert. So you spoke of the product data, right? I can actually get that data into Concert and not have to rely on a CRM or a customer success platform to be able to do that. So I think there is an intermediate step between the two. The good news is that even once you have a HubSpot or a Salesforce or a Gainsight or a Churn Zero or pick one, you still have the AI on the backside. So you put all of your data into one system. That system will not be typically HubSpot, Salesforce, or whatever, because you have so many other inputs. The AI is what you have to use to be able to do all that crunching.
Extracting out the
100%.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that very much. I think one thing I wanted to add, and not to make this all about HubSpot.
Okay.
I mean, pretty much if you're looking at CSPs out there, pretty much everybody does health scores reasonably well.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of the bread and butter of a lot of these platforms. I do think that there's a complexity that happens in terms of once you have your elements, the weighting of each one of those elements, which we haven't talked about yet. So in terms of which signal gets a higher level of importance compared to the others. So if you have very strong engagement with your customers, for example, but the product telemetry is just not there, you're going to want to look at those from a certain contextual way and figure out, what is that actually telling you? So I'd love to maybe just I'll open up to all three of you in terms of the weighting of these elements. How do you go about figuring out which scores are the ones that really you want to leverage more, and what's that validation process like? Anyone?
Yeah, I can start. I think the biggest thing you need to think about is what are your stop, this is break in case of emergency buttons, and then what are your step on the gas, accelerate, send straight to sales buttons. Those are the first two things that you need to figure out, because if you don't, you're going to end up in a really weird spot where nobody trusts your health score. So an example of something that is stop, break in case of emergency, a good example that I hear from customers a lot is if someone doesn't pay. If your customer is supposed to be paying you every month and they skip a payment, your weighting should be set up so that sends it immediately to at risk. That shouldn't be they were really healthy and now they're just down to neutral. No, they didn't pay you. That is at risk. And then on the flip side, if a customer sends you an email and they say, hi, I'd like to buy 10 more seats. I'd like to buy this other product line. There should be something and that deal gets kicked off and moved to really well qualified. I'm sure there's a more formal term for that. That should send it straight to healthy. If you are trying to use healthy to indicate expansion, which I think there's pros and cons to that. But so that's the first thing I think to figure out is what are your break in case of emergency buttons, and then what are your send straight to sales? They're good. We're not worried. If a customer does a webinar with you, to me, that's a pretty good sign. They like you. They're willing to put their brand out there with you. They're healthy. You shouldn't be that worried about them for at least a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree. So no metric is created equal. I think, to your point, enterprise customers, we'll bring those back up. The product data, it's important, but it's really all about your engagement. So do you need to have multiple health scores? Do you have a larger contingent of customers that are, say, over $500,000 a year or over $1 million a year, whatever your sort of that top tier is? If you're top heavy, if 60% of your business comes from your top 10 customers, you need to have a health score just for them.
Yes.
You cannot rely on a one size fits all for those customers. So then you can create a second health score. You can create as many as you want. The most I would say is 3 is the most you want, because you're going to have different CSMs. Sometimes you're going to have CSMs with customers across that spectrum. And so they need to be able to switch their brains very easily to, okay, this is an enterprise. Okay, this is an SMB. And so those scores mean different things depending on the customer type. And the data is, you have to rely on your data. So if your data, we keep saying it over and over again, if your data sucks, your health score sucks. Everything that you rely on to determine whether or not a customer is ready to expand or whether they're going to churn is out the door. So
I just want to build on that,
yeah.
if you don't mind. It's
No,
not
go
just
ahead.
that your health score is bad in that situation. It's that you can do like
Damage.
legitimate damage
Yeah.
to your customer base. So if you're focusing your team on the wrong areas or the wrong customers and ignoring, if you have false positives or whatnot, that your faulty health score is revealing to you,
Right.
you're really putting yourself at risk. I mean, you're going to see higher churn in different segments. It'll become clear pretty quickly, but by that point, the damage is done.
Well, it's also not just your customers, but
Internally, too.
your internal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your CSMs you're going to have a retention problem because you're telling them to do all of these things that they don't actually need to do, whether good or bad. So that's why I think, Sandra, I'm sure, has encountered a really bad health score. And
I was just going to ask you, and this is not on my list of pre-configured questions, but like, as a CSM, have you ever had a scenario where your leadership has asked you to focus on your customers because of the health scores in a way that really wasn't where you felt you needed to be?
Yes. Again, I think going back to what are the top, and I love the idea of having different health scores for different accounts, because again, to the point, I'm dealing more with the strategic accounts, and so the needs of those might look a little bit different than our pulse accounts, which are just those accounts that have a higher quantity and turn, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, I was asked by leadership on one of my accounts to really focus on utilization, and I knew that this particular client, they weren't necessarily seeing as much action in this one particular client simply because of the metrics that we had in place. But I knew that part of it was, given the time of year, we're in the audit and compliance space, and so sometimes there are some times that are just a little bit slower. And so just having that additional context into like, okay, this client, what are they going through, et cetera. I tried to explain that to them. They weren't as receptive, but in the end, I was able to prove through the engagement, through the fact that there was a renewal that was coming up, and we were able to keep the client. They actually even expanded to other teams. Being able to make that case, I think, allowed leadership to see, okay, maybe sometimes it's not just important to focus on utilization, et cetera. It's important to also look at the bigger picture here and what are the other factors that are coming into play. So
I want to build on that, and then I'm going to open it up to questions in just a moment. So get ready. I love that you just talked about a utilization score. So health scores tend to get sort of amalgamated with this idea of other types of scores. So you have, and Alistair, you mentioned like a churn score earlier, or perhaps you have, a sentiment score. Like there are a lot of different ways to look at your customer base in terms of healthy, which is why it's really important to go back to that common definition. But maybe just throwing it out to the three of you, are there other scores that you feel are interesting or relevant that may not necessarily indicate health, but you talked about utilization? Others that come to mind?
I think that expansion is a different category altogether. I think a customer can be very healthy and not at all prepared to expand. And I think that a customer can be mediocre, like they can be neutral. And they can also be very prepared to expand for other reasons. So I think looking at just because something doesn't indicate churn doesn't mean it indicates expansion. And so I think having that as a separate category is really helpful.
I like it.
You stole mine.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, you're good.
expansion.
That's a huge, I mean, just their sales history is hugely important, and it's its own piece to the puzzle. In my health score, it just was, have they ever renewed with us? Because that first renewal is the most important renewal that you will ever have with that customer, right? As soon as they renew, they've said, yes, you are a company and we are moving forward with you, and you know that you have built a ton of trust. And it doesn't matter if you're in a month to month or you're in a 1 year or a multi-year, it has to be that first renewal. So if they buy a 3-year deal, it's at that 3-year mark. It's not after year 1 because they're contractually obligated to pay you for the next 2 years.
That's a great point. Great point. All right, questions from the audience? Go back here in the blue shirt.
Hello, Igor over here. I feel like I'm getting slightly conflicting thoughts about quantitative versus qualitative. It sounds like, Alistair, you're on the quantitative side, and Colette, you're kind of in the middle. But almost every example I've heard is actually qualitative. Like customer doesn't pay, that you can track. Product usage telemetry that you could track, but the content of emails, conversations that needs to be assessed is not qualitative. Like most of the examples I heard are qualitative. I feel like
so you can turn that into quantitative for sure. So there are companies out there that do bring it into AI. They've got algorithms that will report back and say, hey, this is the sentiment that it's detecting. Okay. And now
you're treating the AI analyzed sentiment as, and I'm not disagreeing, I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
So you're treating that as quantitative because it is
correct.
Analyzed
I can do that. But it changes when you get to the enterprise because of the number of interactions that you're going to have with that customer. You now have to rely on the person who is having those interactions to really give you the feeling. Of course, we can record calls now, right, and things like that.
But you're treating that as qualitative, but
correct.
You're treating AI as quantitative.
Correct. Anything that can give me a number.
Okay. I think the other thing is there's a lot of other quantitative inputs that we didn't talk about today. So a very basic thing you can track is if they book a meeting with you, do they show up? Like that's very quantitative, and that's a huge indicator. Like booking a meeting with someone and not showing up, I think we all agree that that's a rude thing to do. So does this person care enough about our relationship and the product to not waste my customer success manager's time? That's a very low bar, but it's a bar. I think there's also counting the frequency and number of interactions that you're having with the customer, whether that's emails or phone calls, frequency of meetings. Sometimes too many frequent meetings, that's an indicator of something that's bad. We didn't talk about support tickets at all. I'm actually kind of surprised it didn't come up today, but I'd say about 50% of the customers I talk to at HubSpot, more support tickets is a bad thing. The other 50% more support tickets is a good thing because the only way you get a support ticket is by using my product to have a problem. So it means you care enough to use the product. There's the number of or percentage of support tickets that get resolved within an SLA. And then there's also the severity of the support tickets. And then you can start getting into, I think surveys is like half qualitative, half quantitative because NPS gives you a number. And there are general industry standards for what a good NPS is. But even a CSAT response in terms of their tickets, how satisfied are they with their response to a support ticket? That kind of can help you figure out, like, is support tickets a good thing or a bad thing at your own company? So I think there's also a number of other quantitative metrics that we just didn't get a chance to cover.
I just want to add on that the absence of support tickets is not necessarily
that's bad. That's
a good thing, right?
Bad thing, for sure.
If they're not engaged with your support team, generally that means that they're not engaged with your company. So just don't. It could be a false positive if you're thinking about, oh, they don't have any problems. It's actually you want them troubleshooting things with you. You want them working through things.
If they don't have any problems, but you're seeing high engagement, that's a good thing. But it all depends on the other stuff and how you rate them.
Fair enough.
So just to beat the quant-qual debate to death, so I'm a user experience designer, researcher, et cetera. So one thing is when I listen to you guys, I'm like, God, the wealth of data that does not get shared all the time with product. Like on my side of the house, there's so much amazing data that we should all be sharing. You know, so that we can make the product better. So that's one thing. I've always thought that. But the other thing is, you know, I've always thought of the quant as the what and the qual as the why. So for me, the two go hand in hand. So like when you looked at your metrics and you said, well, this is green, but it doesn't feel green, right? Then those, you know, surveys, but also like one-on-one semi-structured interviews with customers to say like, what's really going on and to sort of tease that out in a way that probably, you know, AI can kind of do it,
Help
maybe
you.
sort of,
Yeah.
but like probably only humans can really tease out. So to me, it's the perfect marriage, right? The quant plus the qual, you get the what and the why.
100%.
Nice. I like that.
And there are some good AI products that are now being able to do interviews.
They are.
So Genway AI is one of them.
Yeah.
That you can
Synthetic
actually do it.
users, I think is one.
Yeah, they create synthetic users
Yeah.
and personas, and
Yep.
they actually did a study that said that individuals are actually
Yeah.
more likely to be truthful
Yes.
with AI than they are going to be with a
Yes.
person,
Yeah.
right?
That's
Because the AI isn't
Right.
judgmental.
So
So-
they've definitely shown that, and that's amazing. And I think that can just sort of increase your quantity of those one-on-one
Yep.
interviews. But I think again, just like human in the loop, you want to have those, automated AI ones combined with the human ones
Totally.
to say, how do these check against each other and do they map out?
Yeah,
So,
100%. And then, sorry, she's had her hand up for a while. So it's all right. We can start here and then.
Yes, and then you.
Hi, so just in terms of putting these scorecards together.
Yep.
How difficult is it really? Because sometimes it sounds like it's simple and sometimes it sounds like you need VBA programming skills to even be in the spreadsheet. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's this input, that input, but then wait this and wait that.
Yep.
What do you really need in order to bring it together?
I think when you're doing basic accounts of things, that's when you can use a spreadsheet. And again, the way that I've generally seen it set up in spreadsheets is each rep has a tab in a big spreadsheet, and they have their customers down one column, and then across they've got every single input. And the expectation is that every Friday before the CSM goes home, they are going through and they are updating for every customer that they spoke to that week, giving them a new, I had one meeting here and it's okay, now we're at 3 meetings for this month or 3 meetings for this quarter. And then that all feeds into the parent spreadsheet and kind of creates that health score per rep, and you can see it at the end. So that's the expectation, or that's how I've seen it set up with the spreadsheet. Once you get too much farther advanced than that, that's when I would say, like, start looking at another system, whether it's AI helping you aggregate all of these inputs, whether it's your CRM, whether it's a dedicated CSP. Once things are in, the hardest part is typically figuring out the inputs and the weightings, and then getting the data into the system that you need to use. Any CSP that has a health score, once the data is in the system, will make it very easy to use the data that's in the system. You just kind of have to play around with the weighting and everything like that. Did that answer your question? Okay.
I just want to emphasize real quick, because I think it's a really important point. We're talking about, larger, more advanced health scores. Start small.
Yeah.
Like very simply start small. If you have 2 signals like engagement and adoption, start there, put it on a spreadsheet. Like you don't have to build it out for, the future. Like just start with a hypothesis. See, you can test it behind closed doors. You can just compare it against what you know about your customers. You don't have to make it overly involved, overly complex to start. So don't feel like that's a barrier to entry. You can always test this behind the scenes and then build from there.
And I would say while you're testing it, you're working with your CSMs to make, or whoever is interacting with your customer to make those adjustments. They are also not, you are not comping them or metricing them
Yes.
on it, right? Because you're trying to build trust in the score.
Great point.
So
Excellent. Lainey?
Thank you. My question is for Alistair. I wanted to ask you about the 95% accuracy in that analyst. Was one of the components of that health score, did it include the customer has achieved an ROI or an outcome?
good question.
And if it didn't, how has that evolved? Because we all know the last couple of years in SaaS have been really tough, particularly for customer success teams. And we're in the outcomes-based business. Otherwise, a renewal or expansion
Totally.
isn't going to happen.
Yeah. So we did not measure outcome. And the reason we didn't measure outcome at that time is we didn't actually have the data. So I'm not going to put outcome in if I can't actually measure it. When I left Definitive, we were in the process of building that data set so that we could start to measure it, and then it would come into the health score. That's hugely, hugely important. I think that there was another piece that you said. Yes, 2020. So, and my score was 95% accurate up until July of 2022. And then everybody in this room knows what happened, and everything went off the rails. And so we were seeing churn in our greenest of green customers. And we were like, what is going on? And it actually started to help us understand where the business was going because we were seeing these green customers churn. And so between 2022 and probably the third quarter of 2023, health scores were garbage. I don't care how good you were at building one, they were trash. And so starting in January of 2024, really that's when you started to see accuracy start to return to those scores. But building in the outcomes from the beginning, understanding what your customers value the most is how you build an accurate health score. So if you know that that outcome is because of that activation, that product activation, then make sure that that's measurable. Because if it's not, you're hosed.
So
I think we have time for one more.
We had one right here, I think. You had a question?
Oh, yeah. So you touched on it earlier, Alistair, about using AI and how people are sometimes more honest. But I was going to ask, are there other recommendations if you have a small shop and you're really doing, you're using a spreadsheet and maybe you're trying to determine what your scores are, how do you ensure that people are actually answering truthfully? Because sometimes I find that problem is everyone's like, yeah, this is great, everything's great. And then you don't hear
Employees or customers?
customers.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you can usually see it through their product usage too, right? So they're answering your questions and they're saying everything's awesome. And then you go and look and their product usage is horrible. Or you look and see that their support tickets, you've got like 17 high severity tickets, right? Things are not good. So you have to rely on other data to that's why you have to have all those other inputs to help you get there.
yeah, I want to add on that too. I think the pursuit of a health score done well is that it overcomes what you've just described, which is the subjective, I don't want to hurt your feelings type of answer, where the health score actually says something very differently. So I've even seen, in fact, I'm working with a client now who the account managers don't want to put a client as red because they feel that's going to be a reflection on their performance.
Yeah.
So there's a cultural adjustment that we need to make there in order to say, it's okay to put your customer, we'd rather have your customer be at red and actually show a true representation of the
100%.
customer than have you try to hide behind a false number. So there is some element of if you've done the health score well, you're going to start to find those inconsistencies, and then you can apply strategies and tactics to address those. And so that's part of, I think, the long tail of a health score is that it does take time to kind of culturally unfold within the organization and become part of the workflow, the playbooks, et cetera. So be patient. That would be sort of one of my final thoughts on health scores is that they do take some discipline. They do take some time, but done well, they can really give you some incredible insights as you grow your customer base, as you start to scale, because managing 10 customers is very different than managing 1,000 customers.
And not to that was a lovely ending, and so I'm going to bring us back for 1 second. I think if you can't track usage data, a great thing to track in the interim is product feature requests. What is the list of feature requests that have come from a specific customer, and what have you delivered on, and how long has it taken you to deliver? Because that is, you don't have to track, you don't have to have Amplitude or Heap or any of these amazing pieces of software to track usage data, but you can generally say, this is what they're asking for. This is the percentage of that we have been able to deliver on as an organization.
And just my final thought would be, I will do this at every company that I go to. If they don't have somebody who is focused on CS operations, that will be my first hire. No question. No CSMs, no managed CS ops, 100%. Because to your point, there is a lot of data and you need somebody who can interpret that data for you. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. I hope this was helpful, useful time. We enjoyed being up here. I'm sure, and I'll speak for everyone on the panel, if you have additional questions, seek us out. We'll be around. And if you don't find us here, then find us on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. You guys did absolutely wonderful. Very insightful topic. We do have a lot more in store for the day, despite it being 5 o'clock already. And for the rest of the week, we have our welcome party tonight, presented by HPE and NVIDIA right here at 6:30. That'll be downstairs on the first floor. We want you to know, we want you guys to mingle. We strongly encourage it. The only thing is I kindly ask you not do it in this room so that I can set up for the next session. That'll begin in here shortly. Even if your next session is here, I'll just reset the space. If you're joining us virtually, you don't need to go anywhere. Just choose your next session on the schedule and we'll be tuned back in on there shortly. Lastly, I'm sure you've seen a lot of photographers bouncing around. Kevin Ty from 3 Circle Studios is our official photographer. Grab him for a photo and you'll get a personalized Startup Boston Week photo album. I have been acquiring photos for this will be 4 years. It's quite extensive. They're absolutely fantastic. They look great on LinkedIn. And they're, personalized. Startup Boston. Let everyone know that you're here. Woohoo! Info on how to access yours is on the tabletop, little signage back there, but also you'll see them popping around. Stop them, ask questions, have fun. Thank you all again. We'll see you at the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.